Hey everyone, I am here today with the former director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Rohit Chopra. Director Chopra, it is so great to be here with you. I'm so excited to have you on.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I just want to jump right in. There's been a lot of conversation about the CFPB, what it does, why it's important, whether it should even exist anymore. So before you even kind of jump into all of that, can you talk a little bit about what the CFPB is and why people should find this agency important?
Well, for those of you who remember, we went through a devastating financial crisis in 2008, fueled by abuses against borrowers who were peddled subprime mortgages that ultimately crashed not just those individual families' financial lives, but the whole economy. And what we realized was that there was not an actual cop on the beat to police some of the biggest financial firms in the economy, and the price we paid was so steep. So you now have an agency, it's not a big one, that really has been reining in some of the worst abuses when it comes to fees, when it comes to credit report errors, debt collection, payment apps, and so much more. And during my time leading the agency, we really recovered, I think, over $9 billion in refunds and penalties that went back in people's pockets. And I just don't think we want to go back to a system where we have laws on the books protecting consumers, but no one actually enforcing.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, I want to go back to about a month ago when President Biden left office, Donald Trump took office, and there was a lot of talk about the future of the CFPB. And I guess within a few days or about a week after Trump took office, you left the CFPB. Could you talk about that kind of moment, why you left, and maybe kind of go into where you see the agency today?
Well, I didn't leave because I was giving up. I was fired. I served a 5 year term, and I said I would continue serving that until I was asked to go. So actually, Aaron, I stayed almost 2 weeks past Inauguration Day and even completed an enforcement action and more work to make sure that people were still being protected. I was fired on a weekend, and right now we have seen so many of the key personnel of the agency also fired, and many argue illegally fired. These were people, for example, who we brought on as technologists, people who are able to look at new uses of AI, to look at how big tech companies were entering banking and payments. And so, sure, there has been a lot that went on these past few weeks, but now we're at a moment where people need to speak up and say, is this really what they want to see? Where the police who are looking after Wall Street and big tech companies and more, that they're being told that they no longer are doing that job.
Well, I think it's also interesting. Back in 2017, I don't know how many people know this, but you were actually appointed by then President Trump to the FTC to serve in the Democratic seat there, and you were confirmed unanimously via voice vote in the Senate. And then now, just what is it, 7 years later, 8 years later, it's a completely different tune. So I think it's pretty stunning to see that complete reversal. But we're seeing that a lot these days in a number of ways between the first Trump administration and the second Trump administration. Now, I do want to talk a little bit
And Aaron, let
about.
me jump in there
Yeah.
because it's interesting. I actually, President Trump actually campaigned on lowering or even capping credit card interest rates. You know, these credit card interest rates have shot up way more than the Fed has raised rates, costing people over $100 billion in interest. He also talked about making sure people didn't lose their bank accounts. Um, there was a lot that we heard about places that he really needs a CFPB to implement. But of course, we know that many of the big tech giants and tech CEOs, bank CEOs, they've always wanted to see this agency disappear.
Going off of that, where is the agency today? Because there was a lot of talk and a lot of fodder about it back when you were fired, and then in the days leading after when Russ Vought took over and kind of started gutting the agency. But then I guess over the past 10 days, 2 weeks or so, there hasn't been much talk about the current status of the CFPB. Does it even exist? Is it even doing anything? What should viewers know?
Yeah, we don't know. I'm not there, but we have no clue what they're doing. And I think it's pretty wasteful if we are still paying people for an agency that has been told to stop work altogether. We need to get people back to work so that they are investigating consumer complaints, so that they are finishing investigations, that they are recovering money every single day. We calculate is, millions of dollars that is not going back into people's pockets. We recovered billions of dollars for people, but that requires work to make sure it's actually being put back in their accounts. And I really worry that this is just a big gift to those who break the law.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I do want to talk specifically about something recent that we've been seeing on Capitol Hill in this new piece of legislation that would undo a cap that your tenure put on bank overdraft fees. Essentially, for those of you who don't know, before there was banks could essentially charge up to, I believe, $35 for overdraft draft fees, but under your tenure, that was reduced to $5. So people aren't literally breaking the bank to try to pay these overdraft fees. But now there is a new piece of legislation on Capitol Hill backed by Republicans to essentially undo that. Could you talk a little bit about that? Could you talk a little bit about whether it even has a chance of passing and what that kind of looks like?
Yeah, here's really how it all worked. Overdraft used to be a occasional service when you sent a check in the mail and maybe there was delays in the mail and it was deposited by the recipient and maybe there was a mismatch of when you got your paycheck. It was really designed for a paper check, in a postal sent through the post office. But fast forward to today, overdraft became a massive bonanza for some of the biggest banks. Our investigations found that they were even reordering your payments so that you could trigger multiple overdraft fees instead of just one. So here's what we said. We said, look, we looked at the 1969 rule on it and said, this is so out of date. If banks want to lend you money through overdraft, they should come clean about the interest rate they are charging, just like they do with a credit card or other loan. And we said if you don't want to do all those disclosures, you have an alternative. You can just charge a small, reasonable fee that is roughly the costs to administer it, which is about $5. It gives banks options and it also creates a situation where you're not paying a $35 fee for overdrafting 35 cents. This also makes the market more competitive because you can compare the interest rate on an overdraft loan against a credit card. So, who on earth would want to see banks focus their attention and innovate on how to manipulate payments to trigger overdraft fees? And you're right, we're seeing legislation to overturn what is an extremely common sense rule. And Aaron, to be clear, it's not really even capping overdraft fees. They can still charge if they don't want to use the reasonable fee, they can charge an interest rate and disclose it just like another loan. It gives a lot of people the ability to get a loan when they need it while also not fee churning and fee harvesting in ways that people don't want or don't even expect.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think my one of my final questions here is kind of about the future of the agency. It's been attacked by Republicans for a long time, ever since they started labeling it Senator Elizabeth Warren's brainchild. They've just wanted to do away with it. And can they? Is really my question. Can they just via executive action undo the CFPB? Now, it's not funded like a traditional government agency is through appropriations through Congress, right? It's funded through the Fed more. So could Donald Trump, with the signing of a pen, do away with the agency if he wanted to?
Well, it is the law of the land. Congress passed it on a bipartisan basis, and that law is still the laws on the books. So you can't simply eliminate an agency that is expressly said that by Congress to do it. I would say another thing here, which is that we have to make sure that we are actually enforcing the laws that exist. If we have laws that are on the books but that are not enforced, the only winners of that are criminals and those who break the law. And I think Americans agree, and it's true, we've seen some of this research. Democrats, Republicans, independents, everyone really believes in the mission of the CFPB. The only place it is controversial is with lobbyists in Washington and maybe some of the big companies that they represent.
Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you so much for telling your story and for your fight, even in this Trump administration, because I think it's been so important. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Aaron.